First one's from Danny Staple. How did you interpret the laser data? I think you said it was light levels.
Yeah, basically, so the laser is sending out a modulated beam that bounces off the object. You get quite a small signal back because we're talking about picking up stuff up to about 3 foot away. But we then put it through a tuned amplifier, basically a tuned op amp, and that gives us a signal level. And so basically, depending on how far away it is, how much light you get back, but also very much on or off. Are you seeing something? Because in a lot of cases, all you really needed to know was, is there something there or not? Something to avoid.
Yeah. Another question. In the safety competition where you could knock some cans over but not other ones,
Yeah.
Did you actually measure the temperature of the hot and cold cans, or did you just do color recognition?
Now, it was done on temperature. Melexis gave us some temperature sensors as part of entry into the competition. So on that sort of stick that was rotating, there was a sensor on there as well, and that could pick up the temperature of the cans in front.
Must remember this when we come to doing the challenges for 2023. Did you regularly build your own sensors?
Yeah, pretty much. You know, LEDs, laser pointers, photo transistors. I mean, the only things I didn't build were where we used ultrasonics, basically.
Yeah.
Obviously, and then used the standard sort of, was it HC05s, little boards.
Yeah. Have in the maze, in the Micromaze stuff, have you ever attempted the maze mapping instead of wall following?
Yes, I have. I have actually got some mice to do maze solving and got to the middle and gone back and done some runs, but they've not been as good as some of the other UK competitors. So I didn't sort of demonstrate those, but certainly there's some stuff that will come up on the panel session this afternoon, where I've got some links to sort of some YouTube videos. But if you just look up Micromouse on YouTube, any of the international competitions, you'll see lots of videos of that sort of stuff.
Right. Do you think, you know how we have problems with natural light at Pi Wars? Do you think infrared sensors would still be a good non-light affected method of doing the distance stuff?
Yeah, they are pretty good for that. And as I say, most Micromouse competitors tend to use infrared. What you have to do is, if you don't use infrared, is typically you have to pulse your LEDs. So what you do is you take a reading on your photo transistors of the ambient light, and then you pulse your laser on, or your LED on, and you get the reflected amount back there, and you take one from the other, and that gives you the difference. So that's the best way of sort of getting rid of the factor of the ambient light.
Yeah. Question from Brian Starkey. In your view, what has been the most impactful technological advancement for hobby robotics?
Oh, it's got to be the microprocessor, certainly. I mean, they're just, you know, so much power in so little space and at so little cost. It's just made an amazing difference to what you can do.
What's the longest you've ever worked on a single robot?
About a year and a half. I mean, the Techno Games one took about 10 months, but with some of the Micromaze one, I don't build one every year, and so, you know, you'll build some stuff and then do a bit more. Actually, you mentioned about the maze solving. I did all sorts of things at sort of odd locations, and I actually wrote the code for my maze solver on the plane on the way back from Tenerife one day, back from holiday. And I've built several of the boards for my Micromice whilst on canal holidays in the North Broads or various other places with a soldering iron and bits and pieces and big magnifying glass.
with the birds tweeting in the background.
Yes.
How does competing in Micromouse compare to competing in Pi Wars?
It's an interesting question. One of the big things is the factor of scale. Micromouse typically have to be quite small because to go down the maze, if you're more than about 8 centimeters wide and about 10 centimeters long, you're just not going to get around the corners. So everything in a Micromouse has to be a lot more compacted, pushed together and squeezed in. Whereas with Pi Wars, you've got a much bigger platform that you can put things on, and that makes it a lot easier. Typically, with most Micromouse, you end up using the PCB as the chassis, and you just actually mount everything as tight as you can on the chassis. Whereas on Pi Wars, you can build a chassis and then put all sorts of bits on it, and you can add things for different competitions and so on.
Cool. Question from Dr. Footleg. Does the school fund all the robot parts to build all the robots done in the school clubs?
They fund some of it. One of the aims we've always made with the school ones, because we always want everybody in the club to build one, and we get up to say 10 or a dozen kids in the club. That's about as many as we can handle.
Yeah.
And they keep it at the end and take it home and can play with it and do what they want with it. So we try to keep the costs really low. Line followers, we got down to about 10, 12 quid each, I suppose. And even these we're now doing for probably about 25 quid,
right,
for the parts and things. Yeah, I get some funding. I was lucky as well. I had a pot of funding from a series of conferences I was involved in, and we decided we would use the money that was left over from that to support schools' work. So that's really paid for quite a lot of the bits that we've bought over the last sort of 5 or 6 years at school.
Yeah. Going down to a really small level, have you got any suggestions for small and reliable connectors?
No, I mean, basically, a lot of the stuff we've always built as the standard sort of 0.1 pitch stuff, and used, standard 0.1 pitch connectors or Molex or whatever. Some of the stuff we've done goes down to the 2 mil stuff, which gives you a bit smaller. But pretty much any of those sort of small Molex type connectors are okay, or like these on this Micromouse, where you've got the DuPont connectors on wires and things. Those are pretty useful as well and very flexible, to give you lots of options as to reconfiguring things.
Thank you. And our last question comes from Mark Mellors. Have you got any advice for starting up or getting involved in school robotics clubs as engineering support, not as a student?
Well, I say I got into it because I became a STEM ambassador. So being a STEM ambassador is really good, because then schools often will contact the STEM people and say they're looking for people to go in and do things in schools in relation to particular topics. But also if you just contact the local school and say, would they be interested in, running a club, then, lots of the design and technology groups or the computing groups will say, yeah, that sounds great. Come along and tell us what you want to do.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for a really interesting talk, and thank you so much for giving up the time to do the Q&A afterwards.
That's fine. Really enjoyed it.
And hopefully see you at the next Pi Wars with Kesbot.
I certainly hope so. Cheers then.
Bye.